All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're tackling Easter Island. You know, that tiny island in the Pacific with those massive statues, the moai.
Yeah, the ones that just kind of stare out in the distance. Always found them a bit eerie, but totally captivating.
Right, like who built them? How'd they even get those things there?
And what happened to the people who made them? It really is one of the most isolated, inhabited places on the planet.
So, where do we even begin with a place like Easter Island? I mean, it's so remote, it feels almost disconnected from the rest of the world.
Well, for a long time, even figuring out who the islanders were was a mystery. Europeans didn't stumble upon it until Easter Day in 1722.
1722, wow. That's relatively recent considering how old those statues are.
Exactly. And even back then, the island was a shadow of its former self. The population was dwindling. Those early explorers were completely baffled.
Like Captain Cook, right. I remember reading about his account. He couldn't believe that such a seemingly, well, primitive society could create those statues.
And for a while, there were all sorts of theories. Some even thought aliens were involved.
Aliens, come on.
Hey, it was a popular theory for a bit, but we know better now. Most researchers agree the first inhabitants were Polynesian.
Makes sense geographically, but where exactly did they come from? And when?
That's still up for debate. Some believe they arrived as early as the 1st century. Others think it was later, maybe around the 6th century.
Wow, the 1st century. That's way earlier than I thought. But hold on, even if they did arrive that early, how did they even find Easter Island?
Well, that's the thing about the Polynesians. They were masters of navigation. They used stars, currents, even the flight patterns of birds to navigate.
Seriously, birds. That's incredible.
It's true. These weren't just sailors, they were scientists and astronomers. There's even a theory that a bright new star might have guided them, like a celestial beacon.
Wow, that's an amazing image. This Polynesian connection totally adds another layer to the mystery, like a real-life adventure story.
It really does. And speaking of stories, there's this fascinating oral history passed down through generations of islanders.
Oh yeah, the legend of Hotumatua, right?
Exactly. The island's first king. Apparently, he led 7 groups of people from the Marquesas Islands.
7 groups. Is that why there are those 7 moai at Ahu Akivi all facing the sea?
You got it. It's like they're gazing westward, back toward their ancestral home. Pretty cool, right?
It's an incredible detail. You know, I've always wondered how archaeologists even begin to piece together the history of a place like Easter Island. It's not like there are written records lying around.
Well, there are some, but you're right, they rely on lots of different clues. Bones, tools, plant remains, even changes in the art styles of the moai.
It's like a giant puzzle, right? Each piece offering a glimpse into the past.
Exactly. And they've discovered that the island was once a completely different place, covered in lush forests.
Really? I always pictured it as pretty barren, like it is today.
Not originally. Those trees were crucial for building canoes, transporting the moai, everything.
Makes sense. You'd need some serious lumber to move those massive statues around.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, they found evidence of introduced plants and animals. The Polynesian settlers brought their own ecosystem with them. Only the chickens and rats survived, though.
That's interesting. So we're talking about a pretty sophisticated society, right? With chiefs, priests, skilled craftsmen.
Oh, definitely. And don't forget, they had this incredible artistic tradition. Not just the moai, but wood carvings, petroglyphs, and even a written language we haven't cracked yet, Rongorongo.
Wait, a written language? We can't read it.
Nope. It's one of Easter Island's biggest unsolved mysteries. A message from the past we can't quite decipher.
That's crazy. And you know, all this talk about the past, it makes you wonder about the present situation on Easter Island. Like I read about this debate over land ownership.
Yeah, between the Chilean government and the Rapa Nui people.
Right. It's a complex issue for sure. On one hand, you have the government trying to protect a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
And on the other, the Rapa Nui people are seeking more control over their ancestral lands. They want to manage their cultural heritage.
Which makes sense. It's their history, after all.
Exactly. And it's deeply tied to the moai. There's this archaeologist, Claudio Cristino. He argues that the Rapa Nui desire to control their land is about reclaiming their heritage.
And I read about a former mayor, Edmonds Pawa, who believes the Rapa Nui should manage the entire national park. That way, they can ensure its preservation.
He said something really powerful about it. He said the moai speak to a deep spirit within the Rapa Nui people, a spirit that needs to be heard by the world.
That's pretty profound.
It is, and it leads to so many questions. If the moai could speak, what would they say?
Right. What would they tell us about their creators, their world, their decline?
It's fascinating to think about. And it's just one of the many mysteries that keep us coming back to Easter Island.
Absolutely. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface here.
Not even close. We still have so much to uncover. So, we talked about how the moai were transported, but there's still so much debate about exactly how they did it.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? Those statues are huge EE. Some of them are like over 30 feet tall and weigh tons.
Exactly. And they had to move them across miles of rough terrain.
I remember reading about this theory that they walked the statues.
Oh, the walking moai theory?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun image, right? People rocking them back and forth.
Sounds a little crazy to me, but I guess people were trying to come up with anything that made sense.
Well, nowadays, most archaeologists think it was a combination of things.
Like what?
Well, lots of manpower, for sure. But also, those logs we talked about earlier probably played a big role. Imagine teams of people using rollers and levers to carefully maneuver the statues.
And ropes, right.
Definitely. And probably earthen rams, too. It would have been a massive undertaking, no doubt.
Yeah, it must have taken incredible coordination and cooperation.
Absolutely. And it really shows how organized Rapa Nui society was. This wasn't just random construction, The moai were deeply connected to their spiritual beliefs.
Right. They believed the statues could harness the power of their ancestors or something like that?
Something like that. It's fascinating to think about the cultural and spiritual significance behind all that effort.
It's a reminder that even in ancient societies, people were driven by more than just practical concerns.
Totally. The moai represent a complex interplay of religious beliefs, social structures, and artistic expression.
It's like they weren't just trying to build statues, they were trying to connect with something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And that's why the whole land ownership debate on Easter Island is so important.
Yeah, because it's not just about who owns the land, it's about who gets to control the narrative around the moai.
Right. Who gets to interpret their meaning and how their legacy is preserved for future generations. It's a big deal.
For sure. We've talked a lot about the rise of this civilization, but what about their decline? What happened?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It seems like Easter Island might be a cautionary tale.
In what way?
Well, while we don't know for sure, many researchers believe environmental factors played a big role in their decline.
Like a natural disaster, a volcanic eruption or something.
It could have been a combination of things. But imagine this. The island was once covered in lush forests, right?
We talked about that.
Now imagine those forests slowly disappearing as the population grows. The demand for resources increases, and the ecosystem is disrupted. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, you're making me think about climate change and deforestation.
Exactly. It's a scenario that's all too familiar today, isn't it? Easter Island might be a microcosm of the challenges we face on a global scale.
So it's like a warning from the past, then?
In a way, yes. It reminds us that even the most ingenious societies are ultimately dependent on the health of their ecosystem.
So we can't take our environment for granted.
Exactly. But even with this decline, the Rapa Nui culture didn't completely disappear.
That's good to hear. I mean, it would be sad to think that such a unique culture was completely lost.
It's through their oral histories, their traditions, and their continued presence on the island that we're able to learn about their past.
So they managed to adapt and preserve their heritage in some ways.
Exactly. And that's really inspiring, don't you think? Even after facing such hardship, they held on to their identity.
It's amazing. Those moai, they're more than just remnants of a lost civilization.
They are a testament to human endurance, the power of culture to transcend time.
And speaking of the present, we can't forget about the contemporary struggles facing the Rapa Nui people today.
You're right. The land ownership debate we talked about earlier is a crucial part of their story.
It's about more than just land, isn't it?
Exactly. For the Rapa Nui people, the island is their ancestral home. Their history is literally carved into the landscape.
And the moai aren't just tourist attractions, they're a tangible link to their ancestors.
Right, so when we talk about the land ownership debate, we're really talking about control over their heritage, their identity, and their future.
It's a really complex issue, no easy answers.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
But it's one that deserves our attention and understanding.
For sure. And I think it speaks to the broader themes we've been discussing about Easter Island,
The interconnectedness of past, present, and future.
Exactly. I keep coming back to this idea of the moai as silent witnesses.
Silent witnesses. I like that.
They've seen it all, haven't they? The rise and fall of a civilization, the arrival of outsiders, the struggles of the modern world.
It's true. They've stood there for centuries, observing everything. What stories could they tell if they could speak?
Makes you wonder, right?
Maybe they'd have some wisdom to share about the human condition.
Or maybe their silence is a message in itself, like they're urging us to listen, to observe, and to seek understanding.
That's a great point. And maybe it's also a reminder that we need to find our own voices to tell our own stories and to learn from the past.
Absolutely. That's what makes Easter Island so fascinating. It's not just a place, it's a story, a reflection of ourselves.
And it's a story that continues to unfold even today.
It makes you want to keep learning more, to keep exploring, and to keep asking questions. It's
Yeah.
amazing, isn't it, how much this one little island has taught us about ourselves, about the world.
Right. You wouldn't think a place so isolated could have such a universal message.
Totally. It really shows how connected we all are, even across oceans and time.
Yeah, when you think about it, the story of Easter Island has so much relevance to today's problems.
Oh, totally. Like it makes you think about our own struggles with the environment, preserving cultures, stuff like that.
Yeah, those are big issues we're facing right now. And Easter Island is like this almost a microcosm of the whole human story, both good and bad.
Right. And it makes you wonder, like, what will our legacy be? What will people say about us in the future?
Those are big questions. And, those moai, those statues, they're more than just impressive carvings.
Oh, absolutely. They show how ingenious and artistic the Rapa Nui people were, and their spirituality, too.
It's a powerful testament to their creators. But it also makes you think, what will our monuments be?
Right. It's a good question to ask ourselves.
And as we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's important to remember that the story of Easter Island isn't finished.
Oh, for sure. I mean, research is still going on, and the Rapa Nui people are still there, keeping their culture alive.
It's a reminder that history isn't just something in a textbook. It's alive and evolving.
Yeah, it's constantly shaping our world.
And, I hope our listeners take away something from this.
I hope so too. Like, to keep learning, to be curious about the world.
Exactly. To remember the lessons we've talked about, the interconnectedness of everything, the need to respect different cultures.
And to appreciate the resilience of the human spirit, that even in the face of challenges, we can adapt and overcome.
Easter Island is like this invitation to think about the past, present, and future.
It's a place that really sparks your imagination, makes you want to learn more.
And it's a story that, well, I think it touches all of us in some way.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this tiny island with such a big impact.
I agree. I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much as we did.
And to all of you out there, thanks for joining us. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and until next time.